Captain Lena Ivanova stood on the bridge of her flagship, the USS Artemis, gazing out at the vast expanse of the Vega Gulf. The region had been a source of tension between humanity and the aggressive Zorgon Empire for years, with both sides vying for control over its rich resources and strategic location. Lena's small fleet, consisting of the Artemis, 2 frigates, and a squadron of fighters, was tasked with patrolling the Gulf and ensuring the safety of human colonies in the area. Despite the importance of their mission, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. "Captain, we're picking up unusual energy readings from the Zeta Virginis system," reported Lieutenant Commander Mikhail Petrov, her second-in-command. Lena frowned. "Zeta Virginis? That's supposed to be uninhabited. What kind of energy readings?" "Hard to say, ma'am. They're unlike anything we've encountered before, and they're intermittent, almost as if someone's trying to hide them." "Set a course for Zeta Virginis," Lena ordered. "I want to know what's going on out there." As the Artemis and its escort vessels approached the system, the energy readings grew stronger. Lena ordered her crew to proceed with caution, wary of any potential traps or ambushes. Suddenly, the sensors lit up like a Christmas tree. "Captain, we're detecting a massive fleet of ships in orbit around the third planet," exclaimed Ensign Natalia Sokolova. Lena's eyes widened as she saw the readings for herself. There were dozens of ships, many of them dwarfing the Artemis in size. Their configuration and energy signatures left no doubt in her mind. They were Zorgon warships. "They must have developed some kind of cloaking technology," Lena muttered. "That's how they've managed to amass such a large force without us knowing." The implications were staggering. The Zorgons had always been aggressive, but this went beyond mere posturing. This was an invasion fleet, poised to strike at the heart of human space. Lena knew she had to act fast. The Zorgons had not yet detected their presence, but that wouldn't last long. She had to find a way to stop them, or at least buy time for the rest of the human fleet to mobilize. "Mikhail, I need you to send a message to Starfleet Command," she said. "Warn them about the Zorgon fleet and request immediate reinforcements." "Aye, Captain," Mikhail replied, his fingers already flying over his console. Lena turned to her tactical officer. "Natalia, I want a full analysis of the Zorgon fleet's capabilities. We need to know what we're up against." As her crew worked frantically to gather information and develop a plan, Lena couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. They were hopelessly outnumbered and outgunned, and the fate of countless human lives rested on their shoulders. But she was determined to find a way. Humanity had faced impossible odds before and emerged victorious. They would do so again, no matter the cost. The Zorgons had picked the wrong species to mess with, and Lena was going to make sure they learned that lesson the hard way. As the true scale of the Zorgon invasion fleet became clear, a sense of grim determination settled over the bridge of the Artemis. Captain Lena Ivanova knew that they were facing impossible odds, but surrender was not an option. "Captain, we're picking up increased activity from the Zorgon fleet," reported Ensign Natalia Sokolova. "They're beginning to move into formation." Lena nodded, her mind racing as she tried to formulate a plan. The Zorgons outnumbered them 10-1, and their ships were far more heavily armed and armored than anything in her small fleet. "We can't beat them in a straight-up fight," she said, "but maybe we don't have to." She turned to her chief engineer, Lieutenant Takeshi Saito. "Takeshi, do we still have those experimental sensor probes in our inventory?" Takeshi's eyes widened as he realized what she was suggesting. "Yes, Captain, we have a dozen of them, but they've never been tested in combat conditions." "Well, there's no time like the present," Lena said grimly. "I want you to rig those probes with the most powerful explosive charges we have. We're going to seed them throughout that asteroid field and use them as a minefield." Takeshi nodded, already running calculations in his head. "It'll be tricky, Captain. We'll have to program the probes to emit a false signature that mimics our own ships to lure the Zorgons in." "Do whatever you have to do," Lena said. "We need to buy ourselves some time." As Takeshi and his team got to work, Lena turned her attention to the rest of her crew. "Natalia, I want you to plot a course through that asteroid field. We're going to make the Zorgons chase us." Natalia hesitated. "Captain, navigating that field at combat speeds will be incredibly dangerous. One wrong move, and we could be smashed to pieces." Lena met her gaze steadily. "I know the risks, Ensign, but we don't have a choice. We have to draw the Zorgons in, make them think we're easy prey." Natalia swallowed hard, then nodded. "Aye, Captain, plotting a course now." Over the next hour, the crew of the Artemis worked feverishly to prepare their trap. The sensor probes were rigged with high-yield explosives and programmed to emit false signatures, while Natalia charted a twisting, treacherous path through the densest part of the asteroid field. Finally, everything was ready. Lena took a deep breath, knowing that the fate of her crew and countless human lives rested on her shoulders. "All right, people, this is it," she said. "We're going to make a run for that asteroid field. Michael, I want you to broadcast a distress signal as soon as we're inside. Make it look like we're damaged and trying to hide." Mikhail nodded, his face grim. "Understood, Captain." Lena turned to her helmsman. "Natalia, take us in. Full combat speed." The Artemis leaped forward, its engines roaring as it plunged into the swirling chaos of the asteroid field. The frigates and fighters followed close behind, weaving and dodging as they navigated the treacherous path. Moments later, the Zorgon fleet detected their presence and moved to pursue. Lena watched on her viewscreen as the massive warships accelerated towards them, their weapons bristling with deadly intent. "Come on, you bastards," she muttered under her breath. "Take the bait." The Zorgons closed in, their ships moving with predatory grace as they maneuvered through the asteroid field. Lena held her breath, waiting for the right moment to spring their trap. Suddenly, one of the Zorgon ships veered off course, its hull scraping against a massive asteroid. Sparks flew as metal ground against rock, and for a moment, Lena dared to hope that the Zorgons would break off their pursuit. But the Zorgon commander was relentless. With a burst of acceleration, the damaged ship pulled free of the asteroid and rejoined the chase, its hull battered but its weapons still operational. Lena gritted her teeth as the Zorgons closed in, their ships looming larger and larger on her viewscreen. In a matter of moments, they would be within firing range, and the real battle would begin. She glanced around the bridge, seeing the determination and fear on the faces of her crew. They knew the odds they were facing, but they were ready to fight to the last. "Steady, people," Lena said, her voice calm and focused. "Wait for my signal." The Zorgons were almost on top of them now, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. Lena's hand hovered over the button that would detonate the sensor probes, her heart pounding in her chest. "Now," she shouted, slamming her hand down on the button. And the Vega Gulf erupted in a maelstrom of fire and destruction. A series of massive explosions ripped through the asteroid field as the sensor probes detonated, their powerful charges tearing through the Zorgon fleet like a hot knife through butter. The blasts were so bright that the crew of the Artemis had to shield their eyes, even through the polarized viewscreen. When the glare faded, Lena saw a scene of utter devastation. The once mighty Zorgon fleet was in disarray, with several of their capital ships reduced to twisted, burning hulks. Smaller craft spun out of control, their crews either dead or struggling to regain control. But the Zorgons were far from defeated. As the initial shock wore off, the remaining ships regrouped and began to return fire, their weapons lashing out at the human fleet with renewed fury. Evasive maneuvers. Lena barked, gripping the arms of her command chair as the Artemis shuddered under the impact of the Zorgon assault. Her crew responded with a skill and precision born of years of training and experience. The frigates and fighters darted in and out of the asteroid field, using the massive rocks as cover as they engaged the Zorgon ships in a deadly game of cat and mouse. But even with their superior maneuverability, the human ships were outmatched. The Zorgon weapons were too powerful, their armor too thick. One by one, the human fighters and frigates began to fall, torn apart by the relentless barrage of enemy fire. Lena felt a stab of grief as each ship was lost, knowing that brave men and women were giving their lives to buy time for the rest of the fleet. But she couldn't dwell on the losses. The battle was far from over, and she needed to stay focused on the task at hand. "Tekshi, what's the status of our weapons?" she asked, her voice strained but steady. "Main cannons are at 50%, Captain," Tekshi reported. "We've expended most of our missile stockpile in the initial attack." Lena nodded grimly. They were running out of options and fast. She scanned the tactical display, searching for any weakness in the Zorgon formation. And then she saw it. One of the Zorgon capital ships, a massive dreadnought bristling with weapons, had taken heavy damage in the initial explosion. Its shields were flickering, its hull pockmarked with scorch marks and gaping holes. "There," Lena said, pointing to the damaged ship. "That's our target. Natalia, plot a course to bring us within range. Takeshi, divert all available power to the main cannons." Her crew leaped into action, their fingers flying over their consoles as they carried out her orders. The Artemis surged forward, weaving through the asteroid field as it closed in on the crippled dreadnought. The Zorgon ship loomed larger and larger on the viewscreen, its hull pitted and scarred from the fierce battle. Lena could see the panic on the faces of the Zorgon crew as they realized what was happening, their desperate attempts to bring their weapons to bear on the approaching human ship. But it was too late. With a final burst of acceleration, the Artemis closed the distance and opened fire, its main cannons unleashing a devastating barrage of energy that slammed into the dreadnought's weakened shields. The shields flickered and died, and the Artemis weapons tore into the exposed hull, ripping through deck after deck in a blaze of destruction. Secondary explosions rippled through the ship as its reactor went critical, and then the entire vessel disappeared in a blinding flash of light. The shockwave from the exploding dreadnought slammed into the Artemis, sending it tumbling end over end. Lena gripped the arms of her chair, fighting to stay conscious as the key forces threatened to tear her apart. When the ship finally stabilized, she shook her head to clear it and looked around the bridge. Her crew were battered and bruised, but alive. They had done the impossible, taking out a Zorgon capital ship with nothing more than a frigate and a handful of fighters. But their victory was short-lived. The rest of the Zorgon fleet, enraged by the loss of their dreadnought, redoubled their efforts to destroy the human ships. Lena knew that they couldn't hold out much longer against the onslaught. "Natalia, get us out of here," she ordered. "We've done all we can." The Artemis limped away from the battlefield, its hull battered and scorched, its weapons depleted. Behind them, the remnants of the human fleet followed, their numbers drastically reduced, but their spirits unbroken. They had bought time for the rest of humanity at a terrible cost. But the battle was far from over. The Zorgons would regroup and come again, with even greater numbers and firepower. And Lena and her crew would be ready for them, no matter the odds. For they were human, and they would never surrender, never give up, never stop fighting for their right to exist in the universe. The Vega Gulf had been the site of a great victory, but it was only the beginning. The war for survival had just begun. The Artemis and her battered fleet limped back to the nearest human outpost, a small but heavily fortified space station on the edge of the Vega Gulf. They were greeted as heroes, their incredible victory against the Zorgon dreadnought already spreading like wildfire through the human colonies. But Lena knew that the celebration would be short-lived. The Zorgons were still out there, licking their wounds and planning their next move. And now that they knew the full extent of human resistance, they would come back even stronger and more determined than ever. As the Artemis underwent repairs and resupply, Lena met with the other captains and commanders of the human fleet. They pored over the data collected during the battle, trying to find any weakness in the Zorgon defenses that they could exploit. Their ships are heavily armored, but they seem to have a weakness in their shield generators, Takshi observed, pointing to a schematic of a Zorgon battleship. "If we can hit them hard and fast enough, we might be able to take down their shields and get in close for a killing blow." Lena nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. What about their weapons? Is there any way to counter them? Not directly, Michael replied grimly. Their main cannons are too powerful for our shields to withstand for long, but if we can get in close, our point defense systems might be able to take out their smaller weapons and give us a fighting chance. It was a long shot, but it was the best plan they had. Lena and the other captains worked tirelessly to refine their strategy, running simulations and drills until they had honed their tactics to a razor's edge. And then, just as they were preparing to set out and take the fight to the Zorgans, they received a distress call from a nearby colony. The Zorgans had launched a surprise attack, catching the colonists off guard and overwhelming their defenses. Lena knew that they couldn't ignore the call for help. The colonists were counting on them, and every human life was precious in this war for survival. With a heavy heart, she gave the order to set course for the besieged colony, knowing that every moment they delayed gave the Zorgans more time to regroup and come after them. As they approached the colony, they saw the full extent of the devastation. The Zorgan ships had bombarded the planet from orbit, reducing its cities to rubble and ash. The few remaining defenders were holed up in a fortified bunker, desperately holding out against the Zorgan ground forces that had landed to mop up any survivors. Lena and her fleet wasted no time in engaging the Zorgan ships, using their newly honed tactics to take down their shields and get in close for the kill. The battle was fierce and bloody, with both sides taking heavy losses. But in the end, the human fleet emerged victorious, driving off the Zorgan ships and landing their own ground forces to relieve the beleaguered colonists. As Lena stepped out onto the surface of the ruined planet, she was greeted by the cheers and tears of the survivors. They had lost everything, their homes, their families, their way of life. But they were alive, and they had the human fleet to thank for that. Lena knew that this was just one battle in a long and brutal war. The Zorgans would keep coming, keep trying to wipe humanity from the face of the galaxy. But as long as there were brave men and women like her crew, willing to stand up and fight for their right to exist, there was still hope. And so, with a renewed sense of purpose and determination, Lena and her fleet set out once again, ready to take the fight to the Zorgans and turn the tide of the war once and for all. The Zorgans were in full retreat, their once mighty fleet reduced to a ragged band of survivors fleeing before the advancing human armada. Lena and her crew had fought hard and sacrificed much to get to this point, but they knew that the war was far from over. The Zorgan homeworld lay ahead, a heavily defended fortress world that had never been breached by an enemy force. If they could take it, the war would be won. But the cost would be high, and Lena knew that many of her crew might not survive the final battle. As they approached the Zorgan homeworld, Lena called her senior officers to the bridge for one final briefing. "This is it," she said, her voice steady and determined. "The endgame. We've come too far to turn back now." She brought up a holographic display of the Zorgan defenses, a dizzying array of orbital fortresses, minefields, and planetary defense cannons. "We'll need to punch through their outer defenses and take out their command and control centers," she said. "That's the only way to force them to surrender." Mikhail frowned, studying the display. "It won't be easy, Captain. They'll throw everything they have at us." Lena nodded grimly. "I know, but we have no choice. We've come too far to back down now." She turned to Takeshi, her chief engineer. "Takeshi, I need you to give me every last bit of power you can squeeze out of the engines. We're going to need every advantage we can get." Takeshi nodded, his face set with determination. "Aye, Captain, you'll have it." Lena looked around at her crew, seeing the same determination and resolve on their faces. They were ready to follow her to the end, no matter the cost. "Then let's do this," she said. "For Earth, for humanity, for all the lives we've lost and all the ones we're fighting to save." With those words, the Artemis and her fleet leaped forward, charging headlong into the teeth of the Zorgan defenses. The space around the homeworld erupted in a maelstrom of fire and destruction as the human ships weaved and dodged through a hail of enemy fire. The Artemis took the lead, its shields flaring as it absorbed the brunt of the Zorgon assault. Lena gripped the arms of her command chair, her knuckles white as she watched the battle unfold on the view screen. "Takeshi, divert all power to the forward shields," she barked. "Michael, target their command center with everything we've got." The Artemis shuddered as a volley of Zorgon missiles slammed into its shields, but they held. The human ship returned fire, its main cannons tearing through the Zorgon defenses like paper. And then, with a final, desperate push, they were through. The Artemis and a handful of other ships broke through the Zorgon lines and descended on the planet's surface, landing their troops in the heart of the enemy capital. The ground battle was brutal and bloody, with the Zorgons fighting to the last to defend their homeworld. But the human forces were relentless, driven by a fierce determination to end the war once and for all. In the end, it was Lena herself who led the final assault on the Zorgon command center. With a small team of her most trusted officers, she fought her way through the heavily defended corridors, taking down Zorgon warriors with every step. And then, at last, they reached the command center. The Zorgon leader, a towering figure in black armor, stood before them, his eyes blazing with hatred and defiance. "Surrender," Lena said, her voice cold and hard. "It's over." The Zorgon leader sneered. "Never. We will fight to the last human. You may have won this battle, but you will never defeat us." Lena shook her head. "You're wrong. We already have." With those words, she raised her weapon and fired, the blast taking the Zorgon leader square in the chest. He fell to the ground, his armor smoking and sparking. And with that, the war was over. The Zorgon forces laid down their arms and surrendered, their will to fight broken at last. Lena and her crew emerged from the command center to a scene of utter devastation. The once mighty Zorgon capital lay in ruins, its buildings shattered and its streets choked with rubble. But amidst the destruction, there was also hope. The human fleet had arrived, the survivors of the long and brutal war reuniting with their loved ones and comrades. Lena stood tall and proud, her face streaked with sweat and grime, but her eyes shining with the light of victory. They had done it. They had won. Humanity was safe, and the galaxy was theirs once more. But even as she savored the moment of triumph, Lena knew that the fight was far from over. There would be other threats, other enemies to face in the years to come. But for now, they could rest and heal, secure in the knowledge that they have faced the greatest challenge of their lives and emerged victorious. And Lena knew that as long as humanity stood together, as long as they fought with the same courage and determination that had carried them through this war, there was nothing they could not achieve. The galaxy was theirs, and the future was bright. And Lena and her crew would be there to lead the way, always ready to stand up and fight for the cause of humanity, no matter the odds. In the aftermath of the Zorgon War, Lena Ivanova and her crew returned to Earth as heroes. They were greeted with parades and celebrations, their names etched into the annals of history as the saviors of humanity. But for Lena, the victory was bittersweet. She had lost so many friends and comrades in the war, so many brave men and women who had given their lives to protect their species from extinction. And as the dust settled and the celebrations faded, she knew that the hard work of rebuilding was only just beginning. The Zorgon Empire had been shattered, its homeworld and colonies left in ruins. But there were still pockets of resistance, still those who refused to accept defeat and lay down their arms. Lena and her fleet were tasked with hunting down these last remnants of the Zorgon military, a mission that would take them to the farthest reaches of the galaxy. It was a long and grueling campaign, marked by endless skirmishes and guerrilla attacks. But Lena and her crew were relentless, driven by a fierce determination to stamp out the last embers of Zorgon aggression. And slowly but surely, they succeeded. One by one, the remaining Zorgon holdouts were eliminated, their ships and bases destroyed or captured. But even as the galaxy began to heal from the scars of war, there were those who sought to take advantage of the chaos and uncertainty. Other species, long held in check by the Zorgon Empire's brutal rule, now saw an opportunity to assert their own dominance. Pirates and warlords raided human colonies, seeking to plunder the resources and wealth that humanity had fought so hard to defend. Lena and her fleet found themselves stretched thin, constantly on the move to put out one fire after another. It was a never-ending battle, a war of attrition that threatened to wear down even the most determined of warriors. But through it all, Lena and her crew remained steadfast in their duty. They knew that the price of freedom was eternal vigilance, and they were willing to pay that price, no matter the cost. And slowly but surely, a new order began to emerge from the ashes of the old. Humanity and its allies forged new alliances, new treaties and agreements that will ensure a lasting peace. The Zorgon Empire, once a looming threat to the entire galaxy, was now a fading memory, its power and influence broken forever. But Lena knew that the fight was far from over. There would always be those who sought to challenge humanity's place in the stars, always be those who would seek to exploit the weak and vulnerable. And so she and her crew remained ever vigilant, ready to stand up and fight for the cause of justice and freedom, no matter the odds. As she stood on the bridge of the Artemis, looking out at the vast expanse of the galaxy before her, Lena felt a sense of pride and purpose that she had never known before. She had always known that she was destined for something greater, something more than just another cog in the machine of human society. And now, as the commander of the most powerful fleet in the galaxy, she knew that she had found her true calling. She would be the shield that protected humanity from harm, the sword that struck down its enemies wherever they might hide. And she would do it all with the same courage, determination, and unwavering resolve that had carried her through the darkest days of the Zorgon War. For she was Captain Lena Ivanova, hero of the Vega Gulf and defender of humanity. And as long as she drew breath, the galaxy would know peace and freedom, now and forevermore. But even as she savored this moment of triumph and purpose, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere out there, in the vast reaches of the galaxy, a new threat was stirring. Something ancient and powerful, something that had been waiting for centuries for the right moment to strike. She didn't know what form this threat would take, or when it would reveal itself. But she knew that when it did, she and her crew would be ready to face it head-on, no matter the cost. For that was the duty of a hero, the burden and the privilege of those who had been chosen to defend the innocent and protect the weak. And Lena Ivanova would bear that burden with pride and honor, now and always. The end.